Um, yeah, and if first, if folks can remember to put yourselves on mute so we don't get background noise. We do have Lauren Burke who will take care of that for you if you're not able to do it yourself. So first of all, deep appreciation to all of you for taking the time for today's enormous responsibilities right now in the midst of the crisis. So thank you so much for making the time. Also, just want to say congratulations to all of you who played a role in influencing the direction of the current federal stimulus that's under consideration. We know it's not a perfect one, but without your leadership, we'd be living with probably what would simply be another corporate bailout. So thank you all for your work and your rapid response on that. My name is Michael Leon Guerrero. I'm the Executive Director of the Labor Network for Sustainability. Our mission is to engage workers and communities in building a transition to a society that is ecologically sustainable and economically just. For the past 14 years, we've worked to build bridges among the labor, climate, and environmental justice movements. And we feel you as leaders in your respective movements right now can play a critical role together in confronting the health and economic crisis that's facing our communities. So in particular, we've asked leadership from the environmental, climate, and environmental justice movements to hear directly from labor leaders about the current conditions and responses of their members to the COVID-19 pandemic, and to begin a discussion on how the environmental, climate, and movements can utilize your resources, infrastructure, and relationships to support workers on the front lines of the crisis. So we understand that many of you may be involved in a number of conversations within your respective movements and also with other allies and across movements. We felt this is a meeting that we could as LNS in this moment. So let me explain a little bit about the process for how this meeting is going to happen, given that we do have limited time. So first of all, we're going to do introductions, but only from the organizations that are represented. We've asked you all to designate one person to be the speaker. So we're going to start off with the introductions of the environmental, climate, and environmental justice groups. And we ask that you just keep that very short. Name, organization, where you are logging in from. And the discussion today is focusing on mobilizing together in the health and economic crisis. So we know federal stimulus is still under consideration. We're not expecting that it won't come up today, but we're really interested in going beyond just the stimulus conversation. But what is it in particular that your organizations might be able to do in mobilizing support for workers locally and nationally in the midst of the crisis? We ask folks to respect the time. We know there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot that's on everybody's mind, but we want to try to hear from as many people as possible. So even though in the initial section, we're going to hear presentations, we're going to hear reactions from the environmental organizations, there will be a time where we'll open it up for people to be able to weigh in. And so we want to allow for as much of that time as possible. So we do have a couple of folks on our team at LNS, Judy and Elizabeth, that'll be helping you all in providing guidance and marking the time.
Oh, it's weird.
Yeah, it is. It is. So Lauren is also doing tech on our behalf, and so she'll be pasting, as she is doing right now, some instructions that will be helpful for you in participating in the meeting. And then also we did ask in advance about recording, so we would like to do that, so that and mostly for internal purposes. Some of you have asked that you want to be able to share this conversation in the organization, so that's the reason for the recording. But it's not something that we expect that we're going to be broadcasting publicly. Let me run quickly through the agenda. So we're going to, after this, as I mentioned, we'll get into the introductions, and then we'll hear from the labor leaders, the order of speakers, so you all can start prepping now. We're going to hear from Randy Weingarten, President of the American Federation of Teachers, Sara Nelson, President of the Association of Flight Attendants of Communication Workers of America, Maria Castaneda, the Secretary Treasurer of 1199 Service Employees International Union, United Healthcare Workers East, Gwen Mills, Secretary Treasurer of Unite Here, Bruce Hamilton, International Vice President of the Amalgamated Transit Union, and David Roscow, the Assistant to the President for Communications. We've got Faye Gunther, President of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, Local 21 in Washington, and Marty Smith, who's the Midwest Director of National Nurses United. So that will be the order of speakers. And then ask each of our environmental, climate, and EJ leaders to do a quick 1 minute just reactions. What did you hear? What's on your mind? Just hearing those, and maybe any questions that come up for you in the presentations. And then we'll try to set aside as much time. We've marked 40 minutes for conversation, just kind of bringing up in terms of what can be done in response. And then the last 10 minutes is just summarizing and talking about potential next steps for the process. So with that, I think we're ready to dive into things. So why don't we start? Name you off, if you could introduce your organization, who you are and your organization, where you're calling in from, and your title. So we'll do that with the environmental groups, and then we'll dive into the presentations by our labor leaders. So let us start with Gina McCarthy. Are you on?
Yes, I am, and thank you for inviting me. And my name is Gina McCarthy. I'm the President and CEO of the Natural Resources Defense Council, and I probably know many of you from my stint in the Obama administration when I was in charge of the air and climate programs, as well as the administrator in the second term of his administration.
Thank you, President McCarthy, for joining us. Annie Leonard.
I'm Annie Leonard. I'm the Executive Director of Greenpeace. I'm calling in from Berkeley. And can I just say how unexpectedly wonderful it is to see all your faces? I didn't realize how much I missed you all until this. I just want to kiss my screen. Hello, everybody.
Ditto to that. Thank you, Annie. Kaya.
Hi, everyone. Kaya Chatterjee with U.S. Climate Action Network. I'm calling from Washington, D.C., and I second Annie's sentiment. It's just really touching to see everyone. Thank you for gathering us.
Thank you, Kaya. Ken Kimmel.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ken Kimmel. I'm the president of the Union of Concerned Scientists, and I'm delighted to see people I know, but also to meet some people that I don't know. So thank you so much for setting up this important phone call.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Tamara Tolles.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamara Tolles O'Loughlin, the North America Director at 350.org, and I'm calling from Baltimore. And just so you know, I'm just allergic to dust. So being at home as opposed to on the road all the time poses different concerns, so not to alarm anybody.
All right, thank you. Tamara, and apologies for the mispronunciation. Eric Pica.
So Eric Pica, president of Friends of the Earth, and again, it's wonderful to see everybody on the screen. It's really nice. Glad you're hosting this, Michael.
Thank you. No, appreciate you being here. Thank you, Eric. Lisa Hoyos.
Hi, everyone. Great to see you. Lisa Hoyos. I work with the National Sierra Club. And Ben runs our Living Economies program. I help staff Brune on labor, and Mike Brune expresses his, he's bummed he couldn't make it, but Ben and I are here. Ben will be doing our presentation, but Michael, if it's okay, could Ben also say hi, and then he'll take it from here when it's time to do the response.
Of course.
Ben.
Hi. Hey, everyone. I hope you're all safe and healthy. Ben Beachy, based here in Washington, D.C. as well. I direct the Living Economy program at Sierra Club, as Lisa mentioned, and excited to be on with y'all.
All right, great to see you, Ben. Okay, Cassie Siegel.
Thank you, Michael. I'm Cassie Siegel. I direct the Climate Law Institute at the Center for Biological Diversity, and I'm zooming in from Joshua Tree, California.
Oh, wow, wonderful. Thank you, Cassie. Amazing you're able to do that from Joshua Tree. Ms. Jane Fonda.
You're on mute, Jane. You have to unmute.
I'm Jane, and I'm old, so all of this tech stuff is new to me. I'm trying to learn very fast.
You rock.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of the call. I'm really grateful that you're hosting this, Michael. I'm with Fire Drill Friday.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Okay, Varshini.
Hi, everybody. This is Varshini. I'm Executive Director of Sunrise Movement, and I'm calling in from Boston. I will be on video momentarily. Very excited to see all of your faces.
Great. Thank you. Glad to have you, Varshini. And Anthony, ARW.
Hey, greetings everyone. Anthony Rogers Wright, Policy Coordinator with Climate Justice Alliance, calling off from Omaha, Nebraska. This is just incredible. Instead of Brady Bunch, this is Justice Bunch, and I just love seeing all of you. Thank you so much for this, Michael.
Colin Reese, are you on?
I am. Hey, everybody. Colin Reese. I'm a senior campaigner with Oil Change International, typically based in Washington, D.C., but up in Vermont for the time being. Excited to be here with you all.
Great. Thank you, Colin. Okay, so those are going to be the folks that are going to be presenting or responding for your organizations later. Again, folks, apologies. We can't get everybody introduced now. A number of you are staff of some of the organizations that are on the list. But if you could please put in the chat box just an introduction and who you are so we know that you're with us. Okay, we're going to dive into the presentations now. And I'm going to first ask President Weingarten, are you on? Maybe running late unless you're on mute. If not, we will come back. All right, so let's, we will come back to President Weingarten. President Nelson, are you on? I think I see you there.
I am on, Michael. I'm glad you go.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and turn it over to you then. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'll just give you a brief report. You know, we just worked really hard to have a labor-centric aviation relief plan, and we actually were able to keep our framework so that people can keep their paychecks going and stay in their job. I want to let you know that we actually had some climate proposals in our legislation, and from what I can tell, it was actually all stripped out at the end. In my discussions just with the airlines themselves, they were willing to do some language. So this was not coming from pushback from the airlines. It's very important to know. And I should say, you know, probably not as far as we'd like them all to go. What was being proposed was not a no for them. So this really came from ideologues in Congress, mostly Senate Republicans, but some very vocal House members who said that it was going to be a problem if it got sent over to the House that way. And the language just simply got stripped out. Let me give you one example of something that would have been really, really good and got just completely trashed. This plan, you know, cash for clunkers on the airplanes. Airlines would have been very happy to have the government pay to put airplanes on the ground that are, you know, very bad on emissions and very non-fuel efficient, so it's burning more fuel as well. And so that they can turn around and invest that money into new planes also would be good for the manufacturers and good for jobs all the way around. So really, it was an economic proposal that got trashed because it was presented as an environmental proposal. I believe that it was put in the plans by progressives intending to get actually progressive support, even Centrics, to get progressive support for the stimulus. But it turned out that maybe it was the wrong way to propose it. If it had been proposed as an economic proposal, as a job proposal, I actually think that it may have gotten through. And because this package just moves so quickly, anything, the ideologues stripped out anything that was climate related because they don't want any acknowledgement that we actually have a climate catastrophe hurtling towards us. So I just think it's a good lesson for us to think about how we're presenting these proposals in this time going forward. And I'm happy to talk about anything else, Michael, but I really thought it was important for the group to hear that.
Get that. There's anything else. Yeah. So yeah, if there's anything you want to add in terms of what we would like folks also to hear, just how members are being impacted. You know, you talked already about the responses in terms of the stimulus, and then any thoughts in terms of what kind of support that you need.
Well, what we need right now actually is we need people to be promoting the fact that the airline industry didn't get a bailout because we were actually able to take control of this process. And so it was a workers first package that for the first time in history, the corporations are being told exactly where to put the money, and it has to all go to the workers paying benefits. It actually says that in the bill. And so it's just very helpful for you to know that, because we need people to understand that that's what this was, because this can also be helpful for other working people. There's a lot of other unions that would like to take this, or even other industries that don't really have unions yet that use this plan. And there's a lot of industries that people don't want to, quote unquote, bail out. Like the gaming industry, for example, where actually there's a lot of workers there who need help. And the reaction from the public is very much, against industries that they think are pariahs on the public. And we need to turn this conversation around and be talking about the people in the jobs that are going to get hurt, and focus on how we're helping the people. So the more that you can lift up the fact that we were able to do that in the airline industry here, and not have this be a corporate bailout, the better off we're going to be, because people are going to start to think about how we can solve problems differently, rather than from the top down, but from the ground up. So we're really trying to spread the word on that. Separately, the people that I represent are really struggling. I mean, we have been on the front lines of the coronavirus for 2 months now. We just had a long union rep die. He took a COVID test on Sunday. He was found dead in his house on Monday, and I got confirmation that his test came back positive. Because some of the testing is going on now, we are actually having more and more flight attendants show up as positive. And it is a very scary time for people. What we're trying to do is to get the ability for people to get off and continue to get paid. There's a little bit of a gap here until we get this federal funding in place. But there are people who feel pressure to have to come to work to be able to make their bills, meet their bills, and they're in the high risk category, and as was this flight attendant who passed. We've had some others pass as well too, but it's I don't have all the details around all of those deaths, but it is starting to become a real concern. And then on top of that, the supply chain issues. We're having problems with having personal protective equipment, and we're going to hear a lot about that from Randy if she's able to get on. But it is really a very difficult thing out there right now, and flight attendants are very worried. And let me add to that is a little bit, just structurally, there's problems because as restaurants are being shut down, and in the different areas that we're flying to, flight attendants are having a hard time just getting food because they're not able to get food on their layovers. They work odd hours. Grocery stores sometimes are either shut down or they're sold out by the time they're able to get to them, so they can carry food on their trips. So we have some real unique challenges all across the country because of the kind of work that we do, and because we're so we've been exposed to this virus for so long.
Very sorry to hear about the loss of one of your members, but thank you for that, President Nelson. Appreciate it. Okay, let's go to, I don't see President Weingarten. Are you on yet? Okay, so let's move over to Maria Castaneda, Secretary Treasurer Castaneda, if you're on.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. As you know, SCRU members all over, members are in the front line of this crisis. We represent healthcare workers, public employees, including schools and childcare, airport contracted workers, janitors, and others. In my union, 1199 SCIU, we are representing healthcare workers in 5 states: New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Florida, and Maryland, DC. Our members, our healthcare workers, are on the front line of this fight on COVID-19. They work I want to salute them because they work every day despite of the fear and concerns that they themselves may get infected. While working all day in the hospital, taking care of patient, nursing home, and home care, and people in the home, they go home tired, but they cannot hug their loved ones for fear of bringing them infection. So this is the day-to-day life of our frontline healthcare workers. So, but despite of the fear, they work every day to take care of patients. Some of the concerns that we have from day one is the lack of personal protective equipment. And we know there's a shortage, but at the same time, we can really demand that release the stockpile, which I want to go, what are things that we can do together. Some of the concern is the protective equipment. The childcare is another issue because when the school closed, that created a hardship on healthcare workers who have young children and school-age children. So what the union did was, first, in the workplace, we continuously demand with our employers the personal protective equipment, that we have salary continuation when a member needs to be quarantined for exposure, childcare program to support the healthcare workers so they can continue working. And I'm happy to share that in Massachusetts, employers and elected officials worked together and they were able to get the YMCA open as a drop-off center for children. In New York, we have worked with the Department of Education, so there's a support for members to bring their children to work. And we continue to enforce our health and safety standards in our hospitals, nursing home, and home care. Now, working with the elected officials, what I would like us to do together is still, because the personal protective equipment for frontline workers is still very much in need, is for us to together collectively ask for the release of the strategic stockpile of PPS and medical equipment, because it's all in the warehouse but needs to be released to the states, to the governors, to the health industry, or any industry that really needs it, just the supplies lying in the warehouse. Second, we keep hearing the National Strategic, the Defense Act, Production Act. We need to repurpose the production of PPEs and ventilators so we can mass reproduce this equipment that are in dire need to respond to the public health crisis that are still surging in many of our communities and states. And I just want to share a story. We got connected to the Workers United people that already said they can repurpose their factories, and we connected them to our hospital here in New York. They are trying to produce a model reusable isolation gown and plastic face shield for workers. So hopefully that can really materialize, and our employers are excited to partner with our Workers United members so that they can say these are union workers helping union workers. And so hopefully that will materialize. They're developing the sample for hospitals to review. So, but I'd like, yes, the federal bill was passed, but there's one key missing component, which is which we need to fight, which is the expansion of the paid and family sick leave, and to make sure that immigrant workers are covered and not be left out in this crisis. I know LNF and many of the organizations are signatory to these 5 principles of fighting the COVID-19 relief, which is, I think, we should really hammer to make sure that this gets implemented. The 5 principles are healthcare as a top priority, economic relief to people directly, rescue workers and communities, not corporate executives, invest in economic recovery, and protect our democracy like the Census 2020 and our electoral process. Those are the 5 principles that I'd like us as a movement to continue working on and address this other paid, expansion of the family leave and make sure that immigrant workers are protected in this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. That's a lot of useful information in there. There's already an exchange going on in the text box. Ben has posted the link to the 5 principles and some questions coming up that we will come back to in terms of the strategic stockpile. So thank you for that. Okay. Also just wanted to note for people, this is, so we're not doing social media on this. I should have said at the beginning. So this is not a public meeting. And in particular for speakers, if there's anything that you don't want to be shared or repeated, please note that in your presentations. And so thank you for that. Okay, so let's move forward then. Secretary Treasurer Gwen Mills from Unite Here. Can we turn it over to you?
Good morning or afternoon, I guess it is already. Thank you. I'm here in San Francisco and just wanted to say a minute about who we are as Unite Here. We're about 300,000 members across both Canada and the United States. And our members work in hotels, gaming, food service, textiles, laundries, airport industries. Most of our members are women and people of color. We have a lot of immigrants in our union. We've been building that organization and really investing in the leadership of our members for decades now. And I really wanted to thank many of you. I haven't met personally, but I know you've been involved in our campaign against Marriott about refusing green choice and really calling Marriott out on what they're doing with the greenwashing there. Saying they're doing something in favor of the environment, but in fact, just cutting hours and using it as a labor-saving measure. I think we were poised before this crisis came to kind of take that work together to the next level, and in particular, looking at a lot of the financing in how the world works, and particularly around green bonds and stuff like that, and trying to get to the next level of working together to call out the greenwashing and all of that and get kind of right to the heart of corporate financing. So that's something we really look forward to working on together. Where we are at the moment, obviously, has sidetracked us. Just in terms of how COVID has impacted our membership, so 95%, we think that's our best estimate, 95% of our 300,000 members are not working. They're home, and in some cases have some small amount of pay, but between shutdowns, cancellations, closures, no travel, no sports arenas, food service outlets at schools, universities, federal buildings, closing, people just are not working at all. And then in some cases where the state is taking over hotels or stadiums to turn them into field hospitals of different sorts, we're in the middle of negotiations to try to figure out, our members are becoming sort of healthcare assistant workers in different ways. And so the all of what the sister from SEIU said, that's not our industry, but we're being pressed into it in different ways, and there's sort of commandeering facilities to do that. So we're working on that sort of at a rapid pace. I wanted to do a big shout out for everyone that worked on the stimulus bill and for all the union leaders here. You guys, we were, I think, all in that together. And as Sara said, the stimulus really did put the worker piece of increasing unemployment insurance first. But from there, as was mentioned, the paid sick days, paid sick leave is not there, and the extension of healthcare for laid off workers is not there. This is a healthcare crisis, and this is a piece that uniformly is not being moved. And so our next step coming out of this is to really be fighting around the paid sick leave and around the extension of healthcare benefits. I do think just for this collected group of people, it is really stunning to see when, even though we might think many people in the federal government aren't doing enough and aren't doing it fast enough, the speed with which government can change people's behavior and throw a lot of money at a problem that is understood to be a clear and present danger. You can see that happening right now. And clearly, we're not there in the work around climate change, but I think there's loads of lessons from that and all sorts of ways that I think people who are trying to drive that collective action can see what's possible. So mostly we wanted to get on the call to say hello, to introduce ourselves, to be in this conversation together, because there's going to be a lot of work going forward as we come out of this. I think the economy is going to be really upside down for a long time. Our main concern directly for our members is just, you know, the four straightforward thing: money, healthcare, food, and shelter. And, you know, our folks are gonna be losing that. So we're gonna do all of the work with companies and the governments that we can. We are starting direct fundraising efforts. We're a small union. Like I said, about 300,000 people. We have a small staff, so we're laying off staff already in multiple cities and around. We're considering that in the International Union. The other unions on this call have jumped in to help us out, but we're a small but very feisty union. So we want to keep our people together and come out of this stronger. Just a few inspiring stories. We've had, I don't know how many now, but dozens and dozens of Zoom calls with hundreds of worker leaders on them who mostly talk to their coworkers at work. That's the nature of how people communicate and provide leadership to each other. People are figuring out this technology, figuring out how to stay united as workers and be able to talk to each other about how to take political action, how to keep fighting employers where they're not giving us what they should in the layoffs, and just how to keep each other safe. And we're really trying to use this moment to build real community, or further community amongst our membership. And so people are just really rising to that. So thank you for having me.
Very much, Secretary Treasurer Mills. Okay, yeah, we obviously, again, lots of stories that we need to hear from. We got a few more presenters that we want to make sure we get through. So again, I just ask folks to be mindful of the time. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Bruce Hamilton, International Vice President of Amalgamated Transit.
Thank you, Michael, and everybody. I do see what time it is, and I'll try to be very brief. ATU represents a couple of 100,000 transit workers, primarily in the United States and Canada. And we are very deeply involved in transit advocacy. And transit advocacy and climate action are so connected that it's like a really natural connection. And as everybody on this call knows, the IPCC has advocated that, or has reported that really you get the best bang for your buck or thereabouts in fighting climate change by protecting and increasing mass transit. It needs to be doubled and tripled, and really emissions. It's a huge thing, and as part of a Green New Deal, good union jobs in mass transit are really a very high priority. And so that's one of the main things that we all need to be working on together, as I'm sure everybody already is on this call understands that. But that's really, the more we work together with environmental and community groups on fighting for the Green New Deal in general, then the better off we're going to be. At this time of real emergency, transit workers are obviously a very important thing to have around. We are the ones that carry the other frontline workers to the medical facilities, the pharmacies, and the grocery stores, and to the essential businesses that people really still have to get to. And ATU's response to this crisis has been basically to drop everything we were doing and just concentrate on keeping our members as informed as we possibly can with up-to-date, accurate information. We formed a command center at our headquarters at the Douglas Center in Silver Spring, Maryland, that's staffed by officers and staff people who can give very quick responses to our members that are fighting out there for their jobs, really, and for protection on their jobs. And one of the main things that we've been aiding the locals in fighting for is that protection that we really need, the kinds of disinfectants, the ability to wash our hands, the ability to separate passengers and to separate people from each other. And those things are, we're having moderate success in some agencies, but with them, a whole lot more can be done in that regard. We're fighting for a pandemic leave for any of our members who is exposed to the virus, or certainly who is affected by it, or any of their family members that are exposed. And so that's that's very, very important to have pandemic leave. We're also fighting for eliminating fares during this period and having passengers on buses board from the rear door and to maintain separation from each other. People have to get around, but we really need to maintain whatever distance we possibly can. So we need to maintain, obviously, adequate service in those areas to avoid overcrowding. So you have more buses and more trains arriving so that people don't crowd all up. And another really important thing is to retain employees and retain the benefits that they've got and their wages. And I agree with Gwen that the bill, did some things along those lines, but really there's so much more that needs to be done. Quite a lot of our members are being left out of the picture. We've had some success in the big publicly run transit agencies, and a lot of them here on the East Coast really are not collecting fares now and are enforcing social distancing on our public transit vehicles. But one of the toughest things that we've been encountering is dealing with the privatizers. And this is one thing that we can all get together on, environmentalists and community groups and everybody, fighting against this awful scourge of privatization that has been really seeping into public transit in a really horrific way. And ATU has had some success in that regard too. In the Washington, D.C. area, we just had a pretty long strike that resulted finally in a big concession by the authority down there, WMATA, to end the privatization of a part of their system. And of course, they had planned to just roll out this one part and then expand that to privatize the entire system. That's just got to be resisted. And this crisis shows better than anything why privatization just doesn't work. We've got massive layoffs now where our systems have been privatized. Workers there have little or no sick leave in spite of our best efforts. The paid time off is just almost non-existent. And those systems have have lower health and safety standards. They're looking for profit and not to provide a public service. So that's a big part of it. And supporting our transit workers, we need to continue advocating for better federal legislation that does extend all those rights have already been, and benefits that have already been talked about. So I won't really go into everything on that. But every dollar that the federal government spends on public transit produces a benefit to the economy of $4. It's not so it really is an investment. It's not an expenditure. We also represent over-the-road buses across the country. What few of them are really left, and they've taken a huge hit too. Over-the-road buses are other than walking and bicycling, are the most climate, efficient, the least carbon footprint mode of transportation there is. So they need to be expanded as well, made to be convenient, and they should be taken into public ownership as well and run as a utility and not as something that can make some profit for some few people. The fight to expand public transit really has to go on beyond this crisis too. Because the bigger crisis of climate change is something that the public a very major role in. So I'll leave it there, Michael, and move on. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Yeah, lots there. And we just had a transit equity call earlier this morning where a lot more of these stories were also lifted up. So thanks a lot for your presentation. Okay, let's go to Faye Gunther, who's the president of the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 21.
Hi, all. Thank you, Michael, and the Labor Sustainability Network for putting this call on and for everyone on the call. Again, I'm Faye Gunther. I'm the president of UFCW 21 in Washington. We have 46,000 members in grocery stores, healthcare facilities, cannabis workers, food processing. We're primarily women and people of color. We have an extremely young membership. Right now, we have the privilege of most of our workers having jobs, and there's a massive job surge. We're actually working with HERE here locally to try to see if we can get their laid off workers over into our grocery stores as best we can, and hopefully having some kind of sister work so we can help support HERE staying alive here. They're very progressive and they fight by our side, and we need them to stay in the labor movement. I just would say everything is different now. Our healthcare workers are facing a surge of patients and a shortage of resources. We're running out of masks and ventilators. Our folks on the front lines are getting exposed to COVID-19 and we don't have the proper testing and resources. I talk to workers every day. They're afraid that they're going to die or that they're going to bring home COVID-19 to their kids or their spouses. They do not feel protected. Stress levels are very high. Yet these workers keep going to work every single day because they have a duty. They know that they have a duty to society to save us all. This is the same thing that's happening in our grocery stores. Grocery store workers have been identified as essential employees. They are facing a surge of customers who are positive, potentially COVID-19 positive without any personal protective equipment, because all of those supplies in the state of Washington are being diverted to our healthcare workers. We're fighting to limit the number of customers in the store and demanding other precautions, but it is a scary place for grocery store workers to be. Our food processing workers, chicken processing, they're still having all the workers grouped into big groups, which is very dangerous and putting them at risk. Our Macy's workers and retail workers have lost their jobs. I will have to say, though, in general, we feel privileged that our members have jobs, and we are trying to use this privilege to go on the offense at the same time we're dealing with the crisis. So in any of the resources we have created are at ufcw21.org. You can steal them all. You can modify them with your own organization's logos. We don't have any pride of ownership. Just take what you want. We've amped up our communications with our members. We're doing daily hustles, weekly phone call town halls, emails. We have emergency hotlines. We've declared ourselves the bargaining agent for all workers, whether they're union or not, and are making demands of non-union employers like Amazon, Winco, anybody that doesn't have a union. We are acting as their bargaining agent. We have a hiring hall that's set up, and it's actually quite dynamic, and we would love for others to be able to utilize it. We have thousands and thousands of job openings, and we need to help fill them because our workers are getting sick and they're getting tired, and so we need help. We have a massive personal protective equipment drive. Organizations around the country are helping get personal protective equipment here to the state of Washington. We're trying to see if we can partner with the Postal Service, the Stamp Out Hunger, to try to get basic personal protective equipment out of people's garages, out of people's homes, and into the hands of our healthcare workers. We've done a lot of lobbying, obviously. There's a whole bunch of petitions that are going on, including a new Workers' Bill of Rights that we're moving. We're trying to go on the offense in every possible way. I think people may or may not know that the NLRB suspended all union elections, which really is just a total attack on democracy and workers' rights to organize. So we have a press release we put out with lots of unions that have signed on, demanding that workers have the right to organize. And this time, workers must have a voice. This is the time workers have to have a voice so that they can speak up at work. So we want to make sure that workers have the right to organize, and the NLRB immediately reinstates all elections. We're working on a vision document. Look, we should be thinking, we have to stop the bleeding now, but we have to decide what kind of society we want to have post-COVID-19. And what the role of government is and where workers are going to be at the center of this battle. So I think one of the questions is, what support do we need to help, help workers. And I'll just lay out just a few things and then I'll be quiet. I think that I've always felt like if every single person who engaged in the 99% movement, the environmental movement, the Women's March, Bernie's campaign in 16 and 19 would go back to work and organize a union, we'd have a different society. We need a volunteer army of salts who will go and organize unions in their workplace. Your sister, your brother, your mother, every single person who is working, if you can organize a union and fight to organize a union, it creates workplace democracy. And when you have workplace democracy, we can fight and have democracy across this country. So if that's the number one thing, is organize a union. The number two thing is amplifying each other's work. The personal protective equipment drive that I heard SCIU talking about earlier. There's hardship drives that are going on. There's worker petitions. So any amplification of that work would be very helpful. We need to engage workers and women and people of color leadership. Now we need to have thousands and thousands of leaders identified, recruited, and trained working class people to lead us forward. And I think the progressive movement has failed to invest in leadership development. The far right knows exactly how to do leadership development, and we have got to have a path forward where we're identifying thousands and thousands of leaders. And then obviously we need to elect people who are pro-union and believe in science, people who believe in science, and we have to pass laws that are pro-worker and based on science. And I think one of the things we're feeling worried about is that how do we organize and register people to vote? How do we do all of this work when we have, when we're kind of isolated from each other? So any help to amplify and elect people who are pro-union and who believe in science, and how we're going to deal with this election in November. And then I guess the final thing I would say is we need to help elevating workers' stories through effective communication, amplifying each other's communications. Why union rights and climate rights and civil rights, they're all linked together. We're all linked together. And workers have to be at the center of all of that communication. So that's my short summary of what's happening here in Seattle and the whole state of Washington.
Thank you very much, President Gunther. Sobering but very inspiring you all are responding and fighting back. Okay, now I'd like to turn it over to Marty Smith, Midwest Director of National Nurses United.
Brothers and sisters, I feel privileged to be here today. I'm the Midwest Director for National Nurses United, which is the largest union of registered nurses in the country. We represent 150,000 registered nurses in the United States. This novel coronavirus global pandemic is a crisis for everyone, but it has a particularly severe impact on registered nurses and other healthcare workers, especially after years of public health cutbacks by politicians of both major parties and hospital employers obsessed with just-in-time management practices that have stripped the healthcare safety net to the bone. Today, we face a situation where it is estimated that from 40 to 70% of Americans will become infected, and we could experience a million deaths. And of course, we won't know who that is for the purpose of isolating the virus because we are woefully under testing. That means 21 million or more people in the United States will need hospitalization at a time when the country only has 925,000 hospital beds. The shortage extends to ventilators, negative pressure isolation rooms, and intensive care beds, critical for treating COVID-19 patients. Now let me bring it home to you. I represent the nurses in the Midwest, and currently in Chicago, where we're about a week behind New York, we have just under 200 nurses in quarantine and 11 confirmed positive COVID nurses. Now we're wildly under testing. I'll tell you that the hospitals don't even bother to tell the nurses when they have been exposed. They don't even bother to tell them when they have been exposed. In some hospitals, we have seen text blasts going out, informing to the emergency cell phones that nurses carry, that informing them that they are completely out of personal protective equipment. Nurses have to wear a mask over their face to shield them from viral particles coming into their lungs. Now, to give you an idea, you and I will get infected because we walk through a cloud of viral particles that someone sneezed. Now imagine that you're in the room with someone who is sneezing and coughing all day long. That's called viral load, meaning that you're going to get 100 or 1,000 times the amount of virus that you or I would get because you're in the room all day with them, right? What that means is that in Italy, for example, 15% of the people on ventilators in Italy right now are healthcare workers. Let that sink in. We have a massive shortage of personal protective equipment in this country. There are 11 million N95 masks, which are the respirators needed to protect us, in the national stockpile. Most of them are expired. When you put them on over your head, the elastic pops because it's old. We can't get the president to use the defense power that he has to force the factories to produce these en masse. Yes, we need ventilators, but we actually need non-infected nurses to operate them. We need non-infected healthcare workers to operate them. If we are not protected, we will be infected, and then it won't matter how many hospital beds and how many ventilators we have. And we have seen the CDC drop their guidance on what the levels of protection should be consistently. As we started, it was appropriate: a hair bonnet, goggles, a mask, a gown, and shoe covers and gloves. That's appropriate. You know what they're at now? If we run out of masks, you can wear a scarf. That is not based on science. That's based on scarcity. And this is the United States. We're supposed to be the richest, best country in the world with the best healthcare system. Well, I will tell you, we don't have a healthcare system. We have a healthcare industry that is based on profit. And now we are reaping the fruits of that here. And that is going to result in the death of our healthcare workers and the deaths of our patients and our populations. So I've strayed well off my prepared remarks, and I'm going to try and keep this very short. But I will say we are extremely disappointed in the most recent stimulus package that was passed. I understand that there were large swaths of this country that will be helped by much of it, right? There are lots of it that are really important, but there were two key points that we did not get that are really key. The first, the hospitals get $100 billion bailout. Now remember, this is a hospital industry, not a hospital system. So none of that is earmarked to protecting workers. None of that is earmarked to personal protective equipment. We believe 10% of it should have been earmarked towards purchasing personal protective equipment. And a shout out to Miss Jane Fonda on this call, on this Zoom, for wearing the bandana and holding up our sign that says this is not protection. It really helps when you amplify our message in this way. The other thing that we asked for was we asked for an OSHA standard on this, because the CDC, unfortunately, is run by appointees who do what our president tells them to do. And that, unfortunately, is really not science-based. So we're asking that the president use his executive powers to require the manufacturers to immediately begin production of personal protective equipment for all healthcare workers. We are also asking for an OSHA standard for all healthcare workers and presumptive eligibility, because when you walk around with a surgical mask on, which is essentially there to protect others from you, it provides no protection for you. You are completely unprotected. And so every one of those nurses and healthcare workers who gets COVID should be eligible for workers' compensation. Every one of those nurses who's walking around wearing Can you believe the hospitals are issuing one N95 mask for a 30-day period? They are supposed to be single patient use, meaning I walk into your room, I put it on, I walk out, and I throw it in the trash. They're giving it to you for 30 days of use. That's how bad things are right now. So we need an OSHA standard on this. Third of all, we need presumptive eligibility for workers' compensation because we have zero protection, and we should assume that because we have no protection at work, that if we get COVID, we're getting it from work. What you can do, amplify our demands for personal protective equipment, specifically for respirators on social media. So the respirators are our fancy masks. In traditional media, on social media, and with members of Congress and the administration. We have multiple social media campaigns running, and hopefully Amira can post some of those up on our chat. And we have useful press coverage coming out every day. If you can stand with us, however you can, like Ms. Fonda did, that would be wonderful. Without these protections, we will be burying our members. I'm not kidding here. The average age of a nurse is 47 years old, and it will not be long before we are attending funerals. We think the environmental movement can also play an important role in highlighting the risks to frontline communities. Communities with high levels of pollution, high rates of asthma, and other respiratory disease will be at great risk of serious complications from COVID-19. We think that environmental justice and climate movement organizations can lift up these concerns. Many of our nurses also work and live in these communities, such as my own. Here in Chicago, we have pet coke, and we have manganese, and we have high levels of pollution. So my brothers and sisters, I really appreciate all that you're doing, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Marty. That gives us a lot already to think about and work with, so thank you. President Weingarten, have you joined us?
Yes,
Oh,
can you hear me?
Yes, sorry.
So sorry that I was delayed. I've been on, as you can imagine, call to call to call all day. But I want to take up so let me just say thank you to all of you. Thank you for having this call. Most people don't actually know that we are the second largest nurse union, and we represent almost 200,000 respiratory therapists, nurses, many others who are essential servants right now in public employees, and as important as teachers are right now, and they are. I want to take up where the last speaker ended. Our first press conference about COVID-19 was with Sara Nelson on February 2nd, calling the alarm in every which way we could. We had stuff on our website from the beginning of January. Now, because this administration doesn't actually talk to any stakeholders, unlike, frankly, any even previous Republican and Democratic administrations before, they never actually spent any time talking to anybody about what our own eyes could see about what was going on in China and South Korea. And in fact, just last week, we had a conversation with our colleagues, our labor colleagues in China and South Korea and Italy and Japan about what was going on, and where our South Korean and Italian labor colleagues were saying to us, begging us not to make the mistakes that Italy had done, which frankly, governors around the country and many of us are now not in isolation, but doing what governors are telling us because our federal government refused to do any of this stuff. But given where we are right now, the three things that our union has tried to do is, number one, focus on the health, safety, and welfare of all of our communities, our members, our kids, our parents, and all of our communities. And that's part of the reason why about 10 days ago, we kept on working with governors to try to not only close schools, but to also make sure we had the feeding programs. We were dealing with vulnerable kids. We were dealing with childcare for essential workers. But second, and I would actually say most important, was the fixation that we have had on protective personal equipment for the nurses, the respiratory therapists, the doctors, of which my sister and my niece are two of them who are in this situation, the hundreds of thousands of our nurses who are in this situation and who are getting sick because the federal government has not put out the Defense Production Act and all of these other things. Everything we can do to help in this Move On petition right now with 125,000 people signing it, all the things that people have said before about the social media stuff where we're getting N95s from, from construction workers. We're getting gowns made from, plastic bags. We're doing all of these things. But the speakers who have said before are so right. Yes, we tried to get the OSHA stuff in both of these, or all three of these pieces of legislation. We have to keep on trying to get emergency OSHA protections. But we need all of us, all of our communities to be out there with a clarion call that we need to protect the frontline providers who are protecting us. They are getting sick. I have one person who's died already today of my membership. There will be many more, but we have to do everything we can. And Michael, if we can figure out ways to do things in concert, we should do that. I'm even having a phone call with Governor Hogan from Maryland, who is the head of the National Governors Association tomorrow, to plead with him in the same way that we are pleading throughout. But so SEIU, we, the nurses, the nurse union, all of us are trying to focus on this. But this is probably, sorry that I'm so animated, but I don't know how to scream any louder than I am screaming about making sure that this is there. Maybe we should do ads, maybe we should do other things, but we need to scream about this protective equipment because we are killing the people who are supposed to be helping us treat the disease. Last thing I'll say is, as a union, we are focused on the third. So first is health and safety and welfare of all of the communities we serve. Second is fixate like a laser on the ventilators, but also particularly the protective equipment that our first line providers need. And third, all of the economic impacts, short and long term, that we need to do because of what's going to happen in this recession depression. And I agree with everybody else who said, let's also try to envision how to use this for what the society that we want to see. But at the end of the day, all of us know that's going to take elections. It's going to take our activism, but it's going to take elections, because if we have this president and this Senate instead of what we need in the Senate and what we need in terms of the presidency, we're not going to fundamentally be able to take this terrible pandemic that's going to, change our lives fundamentally in America and do something different. We are working on with Amy Klobuchar and with Senator Wyden on all of the stuff that we have to do in terms of voting. We're also pushing in every which way we can. But those are the three major things we're doing: health and safety of communities, health and safety of public of our providers, and then working on all of these kind of economic impacts, long and short term. If anybody wants any of the materials that we've put out, they're all for free. All the education material, I'll share my lesson, which is for free for people. We have lots and lots and lots of stuff for parents, for teachers. We've even proposed that instead of having tests and all this other stuff at the end of the school year, let's have things like capstone projects and activities that are age appropriate. So we have lots of stuff on Color in Colorado, one website, on Share My Lesson, another website. We have work with places like First Book to get books, 6 million books to low-income families. We're working on internet. We're working on all that stuff. But I just want to say to all of you, thank you very much for helping all of us and for being the community of helpers in this moment of great pain and great challenge in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, President Weingart. And I think we all need to get louder in this moment. So thank you. I want to bring in our friends, colleagues from the environmental, climate, environmental justice movement. So again, we are over time, but there's no way we could have stopped these important presentations. So thank you for your patience with that. So President Gina McCarthy, apparently I see in the chat box, had to leave. So we want to open it up again, folks, just really quick, 1 minute, just reactions. And then likely for those of you who are able to stay a little bit longer, so we can talk about next steps, that would be much appreciated. And then we can do what we can in terms of catching people up. But so let me start. I'm just going to go in the order that I have on my screen. So Annie Leonard, you want to kick it off?
I hope I can do this without crying. Oh my God, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I am left with just an incredibly overriding hunger for us to work together, and the sense of the collective power that we can have if labor activists and climate and justice and democracy activists stand more together. So that's my overriding sense. I have a couple of thoughts on sort of next steps. One is a number of you recommended specific things that you would like us to be saying to our membership. It'd be really great to get some sample talking points, because there's often nuances that we want to make sure we get right. So if that could be a follow-up item. There was only a little bit of mentioning about strike. I would love to hear some of your thoughts about how we should be thinking and talking about a strike in this moment. I'm seeing a lot of stuff bubbling up on social media, and the climate activist is less familiar with strike as a tool than the labor leaders, so we would seek your guidance. The other thing is in terms of how we can work together. It seems to me like one immediate campaign that we could all throw down on is the Defense Production Act. The fact that we have supplies, and more so, we have the means of making more supplies and are not leveraging those fully, is so vile and unacceptable. And I'm wondering what the leverage points are to force the Defense Production Act into being, considering that we can't take over people's offices right now. So what are the leverage points to force that? And might we all agree to just throw down on that with everything we have as a first priority? The other things that we could do together that come to mind are working together on package 4. And I'm wondering how we can work together on package 4 about getting in the things that weren't there in package 3, protecting the public sphere, protecting unionization, all of that. And then the other thing that we could work together besides Defense Production Act and package 4 is this broader narrative of what is the normal we want at the end of this. And it's not the normal we had before. And to get that normal right, it needs to really be co-created by us collectively, so that it advances not just worker rights but also sustainability going forward. So I'm very eager to keep working with all of you, and thank you so much for taking this time to inform us all on what you're facing.
Thank you so much.
We stand in total solidarity with you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Kaya Chatterjee.
Thank you. I am in the same boat as Annie in that I'm going to try not to cry, but I just want to say that I'm really sorry for your individual losses, and really, really grateful for your leadership right now. And I think for me right now, this moment is like a test of our species and human beings. And what I heard, just that like we have to come together in this moment. And it really scares me related to the climate crisis too, because I just think if we can't mobilize to cooperate now and show collectivity and solidarity in this moment, when people they don't have simple protective equipment that they need, then how on earth are we going to get it right on the climate crisis? It's just an obvious, acute moment for us all to come together and just say, make the goddamn masks. Like it's very painful for me that we aren't able to get the power together to demand this right now, because I know that means even more people dead in the future and a planet that just can't sustain life, but also because of the pain of today. And so I'm really grateful to all of you for all you're doing. I agree with Annie that we've got to find a way to get together and just demand that this thing get done. I just don't know any other, it's just too painful to think that we wouldn't be able to do that. We've got to have that amount of collective power. And so, yeah, that's my reaction.
Thank you, Kaya. Okay, Ken Kimmel.
I guess I want to say, first of all, that I am absolutely awed by the leadership of all of the unions that we heard from today. And you're operating under the absolute worst of circumstances, unimaginable ones, things that you would never think would happen in the United States, that would never happen in a wealthy country. What you're up against, and your leadership is literally awesome in the true meaning of that word, as opposed to the misuse of it. I'm incredibly angry to hear that there are solutions out there that aren't being harnessed the way they should. And I don't know how to thank all these healthcare workers and transit workers who are putting, and others who are putting their lives at risk for society. I am very eager to harness whatever power UCS has as the voice of the scientific community to try to help here in any way we can. I also would welcome common messaging and welcome a better understanding of what specifically to call for. Is it to demand that President Trump immediately invoke the Defense Production Act and get the personal protective equipment going? I'd love to understand what the kind of the ask is that we can all get around. That's what it sounds like it is, but I'm not totally sure. I have a question about all those masks in the stockpile. If it's a question of just the elastic, why can't we just put new elastic on them? And I don't understand all this stuff, but I don't want to take up more time except to say that I am very woke by what I heard, and we stand with you and want to do whatever we can to support your work. And I 100% agree. This is a test, if there ever was one, of what kind of people we are.
Thank you, President Kimball. Tamara. Apologies, Tamara.
That's me, Tamara.
Yes. Yeah, Tamara, did you want to go? Tamara, you're on mute. Did you want to weigh in?
Me?
I'm having technical background. Sorry, let me fix that. Right, no. I have a small 18-month-old coworker in the background. I'll be right back.
Okay, not unusual situation these days. Thank you. Eric.
I share Ken and Annie's and Kaya's observations. I am just awed by the selflessness and sacrifice that the leaders on this call have both expressed on their own behalf as well as on behalf of their members and on behalf of the public. And I am awed by what you all are doing. From Friends Yours perspective, we are in a position to where we will amplify asks that you have. We just need to know where to target our members and our social media, and that seems so small in this moment, but it's something that we're willing to throw in on and try to help make an impact. And we also, when we fought side by side with you in the Stimulus 3 package, and we got it better. But I think in the Stimulus 4 package, we really have to create the future that we want to see. I'm tired of this bullshit with the Republicans, ideologues, just stopping things. I mean, they want to socialize profits and privatize death and pain and suffering and ignore it. We have to do something different. And, I think the leaders on this call are the leaders that can do it and start pushing, because we're running out of time, and we're losing humanity as we run out of time.
Thank you. Lisa, Oyos.
It's going to be Ben for Sara. Go, Ben.
Yeah, again, society owes a debt of gratitude. We all owe a debt of gratitude to many of the people on this call who just presented on the front lines of this crisis. And like Eric just said, we've been fighting right there alongside you with Package 3, whether it's amplifying the badassery of people like Sara Nelson, who brought the airline industry to their knees, and amplifying the demands of allies, like Marty and Randy and Maria, who laid out so clearly the fierce urgency of doing better. We must do better to protect everyone without exception. And so beyond amplification, we are interested in, not just amplifying on Twitter, but like when push comes to shove and shit's going to get left on the cutting floor, how are we going to make sure that we're standing there right next to you saying, hell no, we're not cutting that. We're standing next to you as the negotiations get tough. And so we'd love, and yes, Twitter handles, et cetera, to tweet out, but I would love to talk about specifics for Package 4, that where we draw a line in the sand and say, hell no, not unless this is in there. So we're covering those who are left out of Package 3, and we do want to take that so seriously. Sick leave for all workers without exception, the health and economic relief for immigrants that were left out of Package number 3. And as we go towards Package number 4, we see that we also, as someone else said, we want to get out of Package number 4, not just going back to the same inequitable, crisis-prone economy that we've all been living in for decades. We know that this crisis, the COVID, is amplifying, is in fact intensifying historic injustices and current injustices. And unless we proactively counteract that in a Package number 4 that is pro-worker, pro-equity, pro-climate, we're going to be worse for it. And so we know, we have very clear in front of us that our response to one existential crisis must not fuel another. And by that, I mean, we are eager to work alongside you to push for a big, bold package for number 4 that plants a flag in the sand. We've been tag teaming with, as SAU mentioned, on these 5 principles. Many of the partners on this call have been tag teaming on that. Green partners, a number of our union friends, to really plant a flag in the sand and say, here's what we must see out of Package number 4. We're talking about changes that are potentially, we're going to be living with, our children could be living with the changes that we make in these economic transformation packages over the next couple of months. And, I'll just say as one bit of cautious optimism, over 500 organizations signed on to those 5 principles in 3 days' time. I mean, we're the left. We're supposed to be fighting with each other all the time and be, and believe me, like, we're still going to have our disagreements, but like, we got a wide array of groups, from unions to environmental justice groups to immigrant rights groups to women's rights groups to youth-led groups, all coming together on these 5 principles saying we stand for this. And these concerns are now being echoed in Congress with members of Congress from AOC to Diapol to Dingell to Pecan to Barbara Lee, echoing the very pushing right now. So we're continuing to push these out these demands. We're pushing them to our 64 chapters, to our millions of members, to try to amp up the volume. We're committed to be there not just to amplify your demands, but to fight alongside you and say, hell no, not unless these demands for the front lines are included. And we're looking forward to working together, and I would love to hear your specifics for how to do so for Package 4.
We've been getting some number of ideas for specifics. We want to make sure that we get to those as soon as possible with the time we have left. But there are a few more people we want to hear from. So Cassie, you're next.
Thank you so much to all the labor leaders for everything you're doing and those incredibly moving presentations and all the information. Our team learned a tremendous amount, and we are feeling the immediacy of this. I agree with everything that my environmental colleagues have said so far, so I won't repeat it. Annie and Kea in particular, we are really also very enthusiastic about the Make the Masks work. But so much more that I've heard that we're eager to support that will not fit into 1 minute. So I'll just say our organization has a lot of organizers, a lot of lawyers, scientists, and we are ready to put those resources to work with you in this crisis. We've worked on transportation for many years and just a lot of different issues. And we're so thrilled to meet you all and looking forward to working more together. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassie. Ms. Jane Fonda.
I'm so very grateful to have heard from these amazing labor leaders. I'm deeply moved, I'm deeply grateful, and I'm so angry. I heard what Sara Nelson said loud and clear, that the asks coming into Congress right now around the bailout can't look like environmental asks. What was that? Am I the only one that heard that?
Y'all heard it.
Anyway.
Someone wasn't muted.
Anyway, that, you know, if we make an environmental ask, it's going to be shot down, but we don't have the time, we don't have the resources to fight one crisis and then another crisis. We have to do them together so that we come out of this with a world that starts looking like what we want. And, you know, what Annie said, I just want to stand behind her. We have to find a way, you know, like all of you, I'm sure, I want to shut down the Capitol right now with our bodies on the line, but we can't do that. What's the equivalent? You know, we're going viral with fire drill, no, virtual. We're going virtual with fire drill Fridays and trying to give people the tools that they can use for activism around this crisis and the climate crisis together. But so I just want to commit Fire Drill Fridays to joining with the labor movement to do whatever we can to make the last noise and to force our leaders to do what they have to do to protect these people and to protect the climate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Yeah. Okay, a couple more. Varsity.
Varsity had to jump off, unfortunately, but I know that she was feeling very moved and agitated by the presentations on the call, as was I. So, hey, folks, Evan Weber from Sunrise. I'm our political director, and yeah, just echoing a lot of what other folks said, an immense amount of gratitude and just awe for your leadership and service in this moment. My mom was a nurse and my dad was a doctor, and I have a lot of friends and family that are hospital workers. So a lot of these stories hit close to home, and yeah, this moment is really real. And yeah, I just I think, you know, I'll just say feeling very, very agitated and fired up about the Defense Production Act, and the fact that this clown said he was going to use it and just hasn't done a thing. And yeah, like basically because it's socialism or something like that, I heard, when literally he has the power to do it, to make these masks, to make these ventilators unilaterally, and is just sitting on his hands while people die. So we're feeling a lot of energy around that as well, like Annie said, and would love to work with you all to think about how we can just make a lot of noise around that. And yeah, you know, if we could use that act in 1941 or 42 to build 300,000 airplanes, we can sure as hell use it to make a lot of masks right now in 2020. And maybe in 2022 we can use it to stop the climate crisis. But right now, just really, really want to be in solidarity with you all and do whatever we can to follow your leadership.
Okay, Anthony.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you to everyone. Sister Marty Smith, you know, in paraphrasing, you know, I heard you on a call yesterday. You know, our statement on phase 3 is we are chagrined and frustrated that frontline health workers, sanitation workers, and all workers are not getting the equipment they can need to stay alive so that they can keep people alive. I really hope everybody remembers this, right? This is what the frontline communities that Climate Justice Alliance represents. And I'm happy to say that our executive director, Angela Adrar, and our policy director, Alvaro Castaneda, are on this call as well. This is what we have experienced the whole time. Katrina, Sandy, Maria, Harvey, et cetera, et cetera. We've been living this. And so I hope that like y'all remember this like moment and don't allow yourselves to forget it. I'm from Brooklyn, so when I get angry, I tend to get very creative, and people who know me know that that's what happens. I am happy to say that at the same time that many of the solutions for this moment were developed by frontline wisdom that center workers in their communities, including just transition, energy democracy, and food sovereignty, with a central theme of transforming from an extractive economy to one that is regenerative. We have just transition principles, we have energy democracy principles, we have food sovereignty principles, but we know that this moment most calls for a just recovery where workers and people are not treated as disposable entities. Frontline workers need to lead this process as well as frontline communities for this people's bailout that we were pleased to start with a lot of our friends on this call. We stand in solidarity with the workers for a people's bailout and do view phase 3 as nothing but a drop in the bucket for the people. We now believe that the people are not going to put up with a 2008 2.0. And I would just, beseech everyone, the Climate Justice Alliance, along with our friends from Labor Network for Sustainability, came up with what we call a People Solutions Lens for a Green New Deal. And there are just, really just 5 questions that are so germane to this moment. Who tells the story? Who makes the decisions? Who benefits and how? What else would this impact, and how would this build or shift power? Those are the questions that we have to answer together in this moment, and so that it's not just a short-term, a piece of acute catharsis. Frontline communities and people who represent our organizations, we didn't get in this work for accolades. Like many of the workers, we got into this because our communities were literally under assault. We were fighting for our lives. We still fight for our lives. So that's the solidarity. We don't have sympathy, we have empathy for what the amazing things that y'all presented to us today. Please stay in touch with us. Let us know what you need, how we can use this moment to really build that so-called movement of movements that busts those silos down so that we can actually come together, because we have no other fucking choice. So I just love all of you so much, and let's do this. Like, we have no other choice. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, Colin, your last one, and then we got to move quickly into next steps.
I'm going to keep it real short because I know tomorrow actually needs to get brought back as well. I want to really thank all the incredible presenters. It was I'm incredibly grateful to have been here and unbelievably saddened. It's truly tragic, but also incredibly inspiring. These are the stories that we need to hear and the people who need to be uplifted. And I think that obviously needs to continue, because as we know, it's sadly going to get a lot worse before it gets better. To follow up on what a few people have mentioned, just to emphasize, I think this is a moment in which my sense is that the environmental community is hungry for how to take action, how to stand in solidarity. And so I do think there's a lot of real possibility here. I think that's true for the next few weeks. It's true during mobilizations around phase 4. And if we do it right, I think it can be true going forward. I think we can come out of this stronger, more united, working together, and with more actual power to win the change we need. This is, as mentioned, just one in a series of crises, and just a drop in the bucket from what's actually needed. So I found it incredibly helpful. I really completely agree on the desire to come together in concert on what we can, and to build solidarity and relationships and power through that process. And we're definitely committed to that. Thanks.
Great. Could I just do a check, see if we can get an extra 15 minutes from folks, because we're going to hear one more, and then I'll summarize some of the major next steps that we've kind of captured through the conversation so far. Does that sound okay? All right, so let's go back to you tomorrow and see if we can, you got your technical situation worked out?
Yes. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I just want to show real solidarity. I think, folks, we've been getting a lot of asks about how do we see climate and COVID working together. And for us, the context for everything we're experiencing is a changing climate. Every part of these things are connected. This work is not new for us. Communities requiring care and repair is essential to the work. We cannot I think what a lot of folks are about to find out is that getting a check doesn't solve life or death problems, that money in fact is an illusion, and they will get a civics lesson that it will require organizing to help them deal with. Everybody on this call is equipped to show up in that way. And I also want to say that everybody on this call is a partner of ours in one way or another. We have worked on so many campaigns together that have been about almost getting to the place where we call for what we need. And I think it's time for us to start becoming more radical in our asks. The emperor does not only have any clothes in this instant, but there is no emperor. There are no clothes. People are dying. So I think a lot of what we've heard today echoes out of what people have been saying about lack of resources, lack of access for a really long time. And it is totally inappropriate that we can ever again think that we'll be able to go back to talking points about what kinds of transition we need to see and cherry pick who can be in the room in those conversations. I just want to bring in recognition of all the incredible snippets of truth that we heard on this call today. Folks that are on worker centers, farm workers, day laborers, undocumented people in the informal economy that drive this country every single day, people who are invisible because we do not talk about poverty and jobs and its connectivity to human health, infrastructure, and what the future looks like. So if package 4 is not the Green New Deal, everyone here should be angry because the umbrella that it provides is what the future looks like. And all of this piecemeal work, it just isn't happening. I am embarrassed that this last set of proposals didn't include the words universal basic income. Like, we're so close to it that the government is randomly writing checks to people. So if we cannot push for that, how can we push for a future that we need if we're hanging out in our silos? So anybody who wants to talk about how all this stuff is tied up and use the big word capitalism in public, we are happy to discuss it with you and to make sure that it's not only a part of our talking points, but it is a part of the campaigns that we build. Again, I think as a human being who is as concerned about the community as I am about myself, I'm grateful that we got into this conversation, and I'm sad that it took so long.
Thank you, Tamara. Well said. Okay, so here's what we captured so far. Some of our staff people have been pulling together some of the major points here. So 1, amplify frontline worker demands and solidarity by gathering messaging for demands, both on social media and through memberships. Potential focus campaign, the Defense Production Act, focus on getting the mass, or as Kay has said it, just make the damn mass already campaign. Unity negotiations on package 4 and specifics for the package. Fight long-term for the world that we want. And how do we reconvene? Do we pitch another call? Okay, next steps. Real soon to dig into how we do this. And also just kind of capturing, like centralizing a lot of these conversations, demands, all of that in terms of being a clearinghouse. That's something that we're willing to do if people feel that we can play that role as LNS, but totally open to other folks also thinking about how to play that role or how we can coordinate on that. So those are just some of the things that we came up with. So any thoughts, reactions to that list? And we'll just open it up at this point for anybody who wants to weigh in. Just please introduce yourself when you we're keeping stack on the chat. Those of you who are on the phone, just go ahead and open up your line. Let me know that you want to speak. And yes, we got a request to put that list in the chat. So anybody want to weigh in?
Michael, if I could jump in, Lisa Hoyos, Sierra Club. I thought Annie phrased it well, and I just felt like it was a through strand that came across a number of times where there's urgency. There's urgency on all of it, but to read Annie's question, how do we get some guidance on who, where the leverage is on BPA? Who do we need to convince? And I think there was a response on that from Faye, but I just thought if we could crystallize that quickly, that would give us marching orders. We've got a huge list, a lot of energy. So how do we crystallize that, Michael? Or Faye? I mean, you put out some prescriptions for us.
Yeah, so, and others may be more connected to the national politics, but I've been in contact with the AFL-CIO, our international union, Pramila Jayapal, who I work closely with, and talking about how to move this at the federal level and what the blocking issues are. I do think we need to understand a little bit more about that, but we need to demand from the federal government, from local state governments, from the state governments, from local governments, and then go straight to industry and demand that they turn their factories over to PPE production. For example, locally, we represent Filson's. They've shut their production down. There is no reason they couldn't turn it back on and make masks and other personal protective equipment. So we need to locally pressure them through local, all local strategies. And so we need it to go, the demands need to be everywhere. Every factory needs to be turned back on. Masks need to be made. Personal protective equipment needs to be made. The other thing is, with the masks specifically, this needs to be a long-term demand. A lot of the mask production got shipped to different countries. So we don't have personal protective equipment here in this country because during COVID, during the other outbreaks, people made masks locally. Then they didn't need them anymore. And so they stopped, a lot of those companies went bankrupt. We need to have personal protective equipment made in the United States and available in our hospitals and in our facilities and in our government stockpiles, all that sort of thing. So we need a short-term solution and a long-term solution, both together.
Great, thank you. Okay, so here's the stack that I have. I have Lisa who just went, John Barton, Nicole, Amira, and Kaya. So John.
Thanks, Michael. This is Director of the Climate Environmental Justice Program at SEIU. I know a lot of you. And so there are a few things I just want to say. In terms of protective equipment, SEIU, I think Randy Weingarten, this SEIU, NNU, AFT, and others are all making a demand of the federal government to centralize production and distribution of personal protective equipment. I can get more information to people about, those demands, how it's working, who's exactly involved with all of that. I will say in the meantime, just so folks know, that our union's doing a ton of work right now connecting employers, healthcare associations, and in fact, like in California, Governor Newsom's office, with textile manufacturers, some of which we represent, that are working to retool now to be able to produce masks and disposable gowns. So there is stuff happening in motion, and already millions we're already making orders for millions of those. So that's stuff that's moving on the ground. I want to just say though that you've heard about the 5 principles. This was developed by a lot of people on this call. It was also People's Action, Center for Public Democracy, SEIU, and people should take a look at that if you haven't seen that already. And then Ben Beachy from Sierra Club did an incredible job of summarizing what in the Senate package was, applies to those principles and what doesn't. If we were going to think about how we could work together, it may be around a package 4 and what didn't get included in package 3. And some of it, like for some of our unions, critical really is the paid sick leave for all. There's so many people that got left out of this deal. And then the other issue is that it is just a crime and and just a public health mistake. The immigrants were literally on virtually everything left out. And the sister who's from HRE, others in the labor movement, we represent lots of immigrant workers. A lot of those folks are left out of this deal. So there's some very important critical things that we need to get in a package 4, and that may be areas where we could work together on.
Right on, great, thank you, John. Nicole.
Hi, sorry, Eric had to hop. And this is just, as others have said, just an emotional call. I think it's stuff that a lot of us knew was happening, but actually hearing stories, from people who are losing members and seeing this on the front lines is, it's a lot. And we want to do whatever we can to amplify your ask, to share your messages, and thank you, Faye, for all that information just now. What would really help, and maybe it is LNS acting as a clearinghouse, we just need it written down. We just need to say, this is what you need to say, and you need to go say it to this person. Here's a petition you need to amplify. Here's an action you need to amplify. And we'll just go out and do it, because we can hear all of this stuff, but being on a call, it's hard for me to even sort of figure out where to start. But if there is just one person or one organization or one something that just says, or even a list that says, go do this, like we'll just go do it. But we need someone to tell us that.
Great. Perfect. Thank you, Nicole. Amira.
Hi everyone. Amira Sequeira, the lead legislative advocate for National Nurses United in Washington, D.C. First, thank you, Michael, for putting together this call. It's been great to be on this with all of you. So just a few things. First, there's been some talk on this call about the fourth package. Just because I've been immersed in the third package and all three packages, just to note, while Speaker Pelosi is talking about a fourth package, and luckily is talking about it because she wants to push forward the OSHA emergency temporary standard for healthcare workers and other frontline workers and some other key worker protections, no one, like the GOP, is not talking about it. And they are actively saying we need to wait, and they're pumping the brakes. The Senate is out until April 20th. So just to note, while talking about what our demands need to be for the fourth package certainly has a place, our healthcare workers across the country cannot wait for a fourth package. We needed these protections a month ago. So we are now, as a union, so we're about to really switch gears. We had a chance to win the OSHA standard and a chance to win the earmarked funds for PPE in this bill. Obviously, we lost. And so we're going to be switching in the next couple of days to a real focus on the Defense Production Act. Just a couple notes, because folks have been asking some questions in the chat. I'm about to spend my night really diving into the regulatory policy on this. I can tell you that part of the problem is that the president has signed executive orders that allow him to invoke parts of the Defense Production Act, but the administration, as per my knowledge, although I have been focused on the bill for a couple of days, that the administration has not finalized the rules for ordering the emergency medical supplies, which means that HHS doesn't have the policies in place they need in order to execute orders under the Defense Production Act. So we're going to be just looking at where that stands tonight and tomorrow. We'll likely be putting out a letter. And so I believe it was Nicole who was just speaking to your request. What we'll do is, as soon as we have sort of our next demands and actions to take, Michael, I'll email them to you. So folks know NNU has a webpage. If you go to nationalnursesunited.org, we have a COVID-19 webpage. It has a ton of the documents that we've sent out. So talking points on the CDC guidances issue, talking points on the OSHA emergency temporary standard needs. On social media, we have social media actions that thousands of nurses and allies are participating in. So Michael, I can all some of those just as like a list for you all for how to engage. But once we have a better sense, hopefully by tomorrow, of exactly what needs to happen on the DPA, I'll send that out.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amira. Okay, Kaya, I'm going to capture these next comments and then we'll move on to try to wrap things up soon.
Thank you, Michael. It strikes me that we don't have a lot of leverage as the climate activist community right now over the president. And so we have to think about secondary. I mean, we couldn't even if something touched on climate, we heard from Sara, they didn't want to put it in the package, even if it totally made sense. And so we want to be in solidarity and we want to help and be there, but I also want to be real about the power that we bring in this moment. We have a lot of people, but we don't have leverage with these decision makers necessarily. And so I'm just curious, there was a lot of talk in the chat about, for nurses, a strike is off the table for obvious reasons, the middle of a global pandemic. But Faye, you said that it's not totally off the table for you guys. So I think at some point it would be good for us to understand, how can we totally have your backs? Because you have more power than anyone else in this country right now, I think, because literally the only time I've gone out in 2.5 weeks is to go to the grocery store, right? That is people's only point of real interaction. And I do want to understand, if we get to that point, how we can really have your backs. Also following on what Amira was saying, want to know the details of what we're asking for with this Defense Production Act, but really want to have a good analysis of who has power and how can we, with the people we have, back that up. It would be really useful to me as a continued conversation, not to have today.
So just a small response on striking. Obviously, unions have no strike, no lockout clauses in their contracts if they're under contract. When they're expired, we have the absolute right to strike. Workers have to vote to authorize a strike. We have units like Bartell's drugstores where they're totally treating their workers terribly on the front of this crisis. We just discussed today if the workers were if they're willing to vote to strike, we will stand with them and use our strike and defense fund to back them up. We have nurses and healthcare workers. We have 18,000 healthcare workers. We have nurses and healthcare workers who are trying to organize a union, and the NLRB postponed their elections till after April 3rd, and we're worried that they're going to continue to postpone them. We will discuss with workers if they would like to strike for recognition and for personal protective equipment. We will have their backs. We will open up our strike and defense funds, and we will ask everyone to be with us. So for us, striking is not off the table. Healthcare workers care so much about their patients. They are like soldiers going in to take care of everyone. But there are situations where personal protective equipment is not being provided and people are going to die. And if our workers decide they want to strike, we will stand beside them.
Okay. Last one I have on the stack is Anthony. Still there, Anthony?
I think he signed off.
You left the call.
Oh, okay. All right. So here's what I'm hearing in terms of immediate next steps. And so we will, LNS, pull together whatever information you want to send us, links, your demands, resources. We will pull as much of that together as you send us. And then we will centralize it, send it all back to everybody with a short list of like, these are the things that can be done right now. And then, yeah, so we should talk about then what's the next step beyond that, if there's anything else that you can think of immediately that we should be doing. And then if we want to have a next conversation to kind of follow up on this. So just any thoughts on that in terms of next steps?
Michael, it's Lisa again. One quick thing that I think Benjamin Smith just said is how do we coordinate together in the future, which you touched on. Another thing would be nice is if, like in the way Amira said, I can anchor some of this, not necessarily servicing all of us, Amira, but like you're going to share your resources with Michael. Ben certainly put out there that Sierra Club can help with, coalescing around of the package 4. So anyway, is there anything else like that to capture? Does anyone want to put themselves out there as sort of a go-to person in the near term? Maybe put it in the chat. And then thank you, Michael, for saying you'll coalesce these resources and get them out. And it'd be great to come together again and do deeper dives.
Okay. Anybody want to respond right away to Lisa's point?
Well, it's Alden. I just noted there were several comments in the chat about possible legal action. Perhaps a few people could go out and huddle on that.
Right. And that's in line. Annie here suggesting yes to more calls and maybe smaller teams to keep working and coordinating on different parts. So sounds like we got a call for a legal team.
I'm wondering, Michael, if we could just have a call specifically on immediate next steps on DPA, particularly if Amira provides some of this. And I think there's a kind of a targeted moment, like to actually do the power mapping that was starting to be done in the chat, et cetera, so we can have a cohesive strategy.
All right, great suggestion. Okay, others?
What I'm hearing is the desire to kind of create some working groups with this. So I'm just saying that we will try to, in our follow-up email, start listing what we're thinking about those working groups. So if you have specific proposals, we're capturing some of them now, but feel free to email us if other ideas come up.
This is Ken Kimmel. I think I might have started the side chat on litigation. And I realize this is kind of, but I still want to get it out there. What about some kind of class action suit against the Trump administration for recklessly endangering all these workers? I think it would be. I mean, there'd be a million reasons why the court would touch it, but man, would that make them look bad? And if you had all these different workers with their declarations, you know, the things that you were talking about, Marty, you load up those narratives and those stories and you just, you know, serve the president with a complaint and blast out as far and wide. That would get a lot of attention.
Ken, is that something that the state attorneys general could take on?
Maybe, but I feel like the proper plaintiffs are the people whose lives are being put at risk.
Yeah.
And the people we've heard on the call are their representatives. It's not so much, look, it's not so much a lawsuit that you file because you think you're actually going to get a court order. It's because it could be an incredibly powerful narrative, and it would put Trump on the defensive for failing to, and I recognize this is a little murky because technically he's invoked this act, but he's not actually doing it as best as I understand it. This could be, I think, pretty powerful. Yeah. So I just wanted to throw it out.
Great. Sounds like definitely a good thing for legal folks to get together on and talk through. Yeah. Okay. All right, so we got a couple then. So we got one follow-up conversation directly on the DPA. We've got one potential legal team discussion around filing a class action suit. Any other ideas before we close out? And then we'll take it from here for now.
Hey, Michael, maybe on the legal stuff, you could just make it a little broader. We have some legal ideas, but probably not a class action on our end.
All right, great.
Amira and or Michael, go ahead, Evan.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, just the last thing that I heard from John was just coordination around phase 4. Yeah, in line with the 5 principles or our shared priorities or what have you.
Yeah.
My quick thing was just a follow up on.
I want to say that I just want to say that I agree with Amira, by the way, about the how difficult this is going to be, and it's not going to be right away either. Nevertheless, it seems to me this is something that we can advocate around, press for, and come to some common demands.
And just a quick logistical thing on the follow-up call on the DPA, is people who know better than I, is the timing such that we should try to do that like Monday soon, or any guidance there on urgency timing? Mira?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Okay, so as soon as we get that information, we've also got the list, the email list. You can blast it out to everybody, and then or we can forward it out as soon as we get the information from you too. So, okay, anything else? Other next steps? I think we got enough to work with right now. We will work on getting you something tomorrow in terms of a summation. So yeah, just really big thank you to everybody, all our presenters, everybody who made the time to make this conversation and stay as long as you did as well. So yeah, thank you. And we will follow up with you in the very, very short term. So thanks.
Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you for bringing us together, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everybody who presented. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, great call.